Who's your darkest patient you ever encountered as a psychiatrist? I am not a psychiatrist or psychologist. In fact, I have no formal mental health training, but I have experienced a very dark side in my own teenage son. Here is what happened to our family. My son was diagnosed with minimal brain damage and severe speech delay when he was a toddler. He spent 8 years in speech therapy, and when he was released at age 10, his therapist thought that he would outgrow the residual communication issues. That being said, we knew that our youngest son was very different from our two older children. He received the same kind of discipline in our home, the same religious training, and the same love and affection that we gave our other kids. Despite the similarities in his childhood environment and theirs, he struggled with interpersonal skills and became a loner. He failed to see the consequences of his actions, and appeared to have no conscience at all. We made the mistake of assuming that his behavior was tied to his communication issues and frustrations from them, so we waited for him to mature out of the behaviors and language shortcomings. Simply put, it didn't happen. By the time our son was in high school, his lack of social skills was taking a toll on him and on our family. He was frequently beat up at school, and clearly did not see any of his own actions as precipitating the violence. His stock and trade answer to our queries about the circumstances was, "It wasn't my fault." As his freshman year wore on, we also became aware that his friends were social misfits, and they too lacked interpersonal skills. This was about the same time his mischievous behavior started to take a dark turn, as did his view of life. He was depressed. His humor was dark and not funny, and he delighted in ugliness, horror stories, and the macabre, etc. The final straw was when he had been caught stealing. This was the first time any of our kids had been in serious trouble, and we were embarrassed and ashamed. We also realized that our son was so morose that he might take his own life. All of this led up to the first time I looked into my child's eyes and saw how dead they had become. For the first time, I was afraid of my own child. Not because of anything that he said or did, but because of the animal look in his eyes. Immediately sought psychiatric help for him. The psychiatrist diagnosed our youngest son with attention deficit disorder. Although academically his grades were passable, he was an underachiever. The doctor put him on Ritalin. It took a few weeks to get the dosage right for him, and it was a bit of a painful process, since too high a dose caused him to become angry. He had never shown temper before the Ritalin. Once the dosage was adjusted down to an appropriate level, he started to notice things that had escaped him before. His behavior became like his brothers and sisters, and he was no longer a discipline problem at school or at home. I can best describe the difference by comparing his behavior to the moon. Before Ritalin, he lived on the dark side of the moon, but after medication he suddenly came into the light. All of the lessons we thought had been lost on him came shining through. It was a revelation. His math teacher called us to apologize. She said, "I had no idea that your son is a genius in mathematics. I just thought he was a pest, because he always had his hand raised." How sad. The Ritalin alone helped him, but we knew the social damage done to him and by him throughout his public school career would continue to plague him, since most of the kids had known him since kindergarten. We removed him from public school. The day I signed him out of the school secretary said, "You do know that he is different than your other children, don't you?" I informed her that I indeed knew that he was different, but that he had been diagnosed with AD. To wit, she said, "Oh, we knew that." I was appalled, because no one had ever mentioned it to me. The secretary said, "Well, if we told you he had it, we would have had to use resources on him." So much for public school. We enrolled our son in a learning academy that specialized in kids with learning differences or disabilities. Within weeks of his first class, he was enthusiastic about school and making new friends. His behavior continued to improve, and the school also worked on his social skills. His language dysfunction cleared up with only a lingering stutter, which he still has to this day. Our son's care and private academy education was extremely expensive. However, considering the alternative of jail, bad life choices, violence, and exorbitant legal fees, we knew we had to do the best we could for him. We had to sell our house to get the funds to pay for the remainder of his high school years. The trade-off was well worth it. Today our son has been employed by the same firm for 20 years, he has been married for 17, and has 3 boys, 2 of whom also have learning disabilities. He is a terrific dad and husband. My point in sharing my story is that mental health and learning differences or disabilities can have a profound effect on young minds, as well as their sense of self and their ability to relate to or empathize with others. I believe that the prisons are full of people who might have turned out differently if they had the opportunities that we were blessed to give our son. It is for this reason that I ask conservatives and liberals to get behind legislation that enables kids from every walk of life, regardless of socioeconomic status, to have the educational and special education opportunities to give them the best shot at a normal life. Our son had an 8-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio. Most families cannot afford $20,000 per year to educate their high school or elementary-aged kids. However, I believe that if the government could subsidize these types of programs, there would be fewer gangs, less violence, and more contributing adults in our society. I wish every parent with a child who is suffering from mental, emotional, or social dysfunction my heartfelt empathy.